So call the Planning Commission of November 21st, 2022 to order at 7:33 p.m. And start with the roll call. Vice Chair Tessman.
Present.
Commissioner Aliff.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Commissioner Lambert.
He will be absent tonight, and he did email. He had something come up at work, and so will be unable to make it tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Mather. I don't see him. Absent. And then Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Okay. And then on the agenda, I had a pre-conversation that in spite of the fact we've got both historic design review procedures and site plan permit code amendment scheduled, we discovered that it's got kind of a mismatch, and we kind of got a screw up here. We've got a mismatch of input from a number of things. There was some miscommunication, I believe, between the senior planner and community development director, and we have also had a delayed legal review. You put all that together and you're looking at duplicate stuff there, and some of the stuff is not accurate. An example is if you start scrolling and you see the first table, that's really not what we were supposed to show. We were supposed to show the table on page 24. So in terms of the agenda, what I'd like to do, and I got the suggestion from the community development director, is open the public hearing to provide input, because I don't see anybody here now, on the historic design review procedures and site plan permit. However, ask the staff to clean these up so that we can properly review and discuss those. And then we'll close the public hearing next meeting. And I understand that that is a valid procedure. So that's one part of the agenda. Any comment on that?
No comment.
Okay, so then basically items 2, 3, 4, and 5, although we will open the public hearings as we did announce it, we'll leave that public hearing open for comments in those areas and until the next meeting, in which case we'll take whatever input we've received, discuss the issue once it's cleaned up, and then close the public hearing and prepare the historic design review procedures and site plan review code amendment for the council. And that would leave, so anyway, we don't want to alter the agenda there. That would also leave the training. We do want to show, I believe it's 20 minutes of what we had on the short course. Wanted to show that in place of this after we get through the rest of it. So move that we change the agenda as I described. We're going to remove items 2, 3, 4, and 5 and replace those with a 20-minute of the short course. We will cover agenda items number 1 and other items of planning commissioner interest, as well as the council liaison report. Can I get a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, with that amended agenda, let me move into approval of the minutes dated November 7th, 2022. I move that we approve the minutes as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, ask for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes for November 7th, 2022, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Do we have a council liaison report?
Greetings, commissioners. So it's been nearly a month since what I was going to mention at the last meeting. But anyway, what I did want to just make sure that the Planning Commission was aware of was that on October 24th, the City Council unanimously approved the planned commercial industrial plan and development agreement for the former Weyerhaeuser Mill site. The agreement includes significant affordable housing, with 22% of units being at 80% AMI, and the majority of those being at 60% AMI, The plan also provides significant funding for a fire ladder truck because the plan includes a number of somewhat taller buildings. Some other local road improvements will also receive proportional funding due to the potential increases in traffic volume. Planning Area 1 will have a retail core akin to Center with residential apartments on top. A total of 160 residential units are permitted in the agreement. And the surrounding area, still in Planning Area 1, will include commercial uses, light industrial, and warehouses. The area is likely to be developed over the next few years. Planning Areas 2 and 3 will be more commercial and industrial, but likely to require additional environmental cleanup. The rest of the mill site may be developed over the next 10 to 15 years or so. About 2/3 of the property will remain open space with natural habitats and flood storage. But also just be aware that the PCI plan does not include Forest Lake because that area is still owned by Weyerhaeuser. So that's essentially the update on the mill site from council. And that was the only thing that I had to report on tonight.
Well, congratulations. I know that has been in play for many years. I mean, I knew about it first in 2015. I suspect it's been in play for 5 years before that. Flickering light here. Let me turn this flickering light off. Any questions from any questions from the council or commissioners to the council member? Well, I did have one. We noted with the housing needs analysis that I believe 160 units are going in the mill site. And I was curious as to how that was zoned, because we noted that most of Snoqualmie is not zoned for high density. I was curious, does that qualify as high, medium, or low density for the first part of the development?
I believe that technically it's medium density, but regardless, what they had to do was apply for, I believe the correct term, and Mr. Sturban can correct me, is a variance. Is it a waiver of variance? I think it was a variance. But at any rate, and that had to be approved by the council in order to do that.
So I can address that one in a little more detail if you'd like. The urban growth capacity report, which was the basis for the housing needs assessment, included a capacity calculation for those areas that are zoned for and allow residential development in Snoqualmie. That does not include the planned commercial industrial zone. So the urban growth capacity report assumed zero capacity on the mill site for housing. There was discussion at one point between the city and King County about including the 160 units as pipeline development. However, ultimately we chose not to do that because at the time the project was not approved by the city council. Obviously it is now. This is a couple years after that report was finalized. So the 160 units on that site as part of that project are, if you will, extra housing that was not necessarily part of the capacity calculation that was done for that report. As to what it would be considered density wise, I don't know, because the methodology applied for the urban growth capacity report doesn't lend itself well to looking at that kind of development, because it's 160 units spread across 261 acres, which of course is less than 1 unit per acre all told. Even if you remove all the critical areas and everything, you're still getting to a relatively low density. So I'm not sure how to exactly put it into what category at this time.
Yeah. I mean, Councilmember Johnson, one thing that we discussed at the previous Plan Commission, we talked about the housing needs analysis, is we used an example of the panorama apartments and discovered that even those were either low or just barely medium zoning, so that so it's, in order to get something beyond low, we're going to have to do something, even more bigger than what we did in Panorama. I mean, Panorama was multi-story, and we still didn't really crack that, low to medium density. So if we truly want something above medium density, we're gonna have to do something very different.
Yeah, definitely. And because the city, at least the land that is currently within the city, we do have an urban growth area, but there's very little buildable land. So it's a problem that we're tackling with regard to how do we increase our housing supply and address affordability. We do have a council member, Watton, who we have kind of given the special task of working with a regional council to try to work out, and by regional, I mean Greater Snoqualmie Valley, to try to work out best ways that the valley as a whole can address a lot of those issues. Some of it may require some level of redevelopment, but that's all things that take a lot of time to do and a lot of effort. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, agreed.
A lot of heavy lifting. And by the way, I did also want to give compliments to the staff for all of their hard work on the mill site as well. They've been working tirelessly for a very long time on that.
Yeah. But again, congratulations on getting as far as you got. I know that was many, many years in coming. Any questions from any of the other commissioners? Okay, hearing none. I'm seeing hands up. Commissioner Johnson, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Johnson, any other topic?
No, that was my only report.
All right, thank you. So next on the agenda item, again, I'll open this up and keep this open. Again, I'm open for discussion. I discussed this with the Community Development Director that we can open the public hearing. That way we open it up for input to be transparent and to adhere to what we had publicly announced. But we'll have to keep that public hearing open for input until the next committee hearing. So what I'm proposing to do is that we open up the public hearing for the historic design review procedures, site plan permit code amendment, but we table discussion on those until we get a clean package to review, which will be at the next meeting. Any discussion on that before I open these up? Okay, then at this time, at 7:46 p.m. on 11/21/2022, I will open up for public hearing the historic design review procedures. And I will also, at 7:46 p.m. on 11/21/2022, open up the public hearing for the site plan permit code amendment. So we will accept all public comment on these two items and have our discussion at the next planning commission with a more cleaned up package. And I don't know if staff, if you wanted to add any more commentary to that agenda item before I move on. Okay, if nothing further there, then what I'd like to do is, if we're ready, let's tee up the one piece of the short course that I think a number of us saw, but I know that Commissioner Aliff hasn't seen, and we'll cover that and then move on to items of planning commissioner interest.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I was just wondering, since you opened up a public hearing, I was wondering, do you have to technically go into recess or something, or does that leave the floor open now in the council chambers for anyone who gives a comment? Is that officially during the public hearing, or how exactly does that work? Or is it just okay? Just leave it open.
Yeah.
Really, Mr. Sturbank.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I could speak to that. So probably the easiest thing for the commission to do would be to move to continue the public hearing until the December 5th meeting. And so you could indicate, the motion could indicate, if, so I believe it would be your intent that the commission would accept written public comment in the interim, and that the public hearing would be continued during the December 5th meeting if members of the public wanted to appear then and comment.
Yes, that's exactly the intent. And I'll make a move that we continue the public hearing until at the December 5th commission meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for that clarification.
Bet.
Okay, are we ready for to share the snippet of the short course?
I can. I want to do a bit of a test to make sure that it plays. Just so you know, I want to give you a heads up. So I'm prepared to try. Too many computers in my end. Okay, so my goal here is to click the play button, see how this turns out. I'll begin. What I'm going to do is I'll play for about 10 seconds, and I'm going to ask for some feedback.
Yeah, I don't hear it.
No audio on your end? This was a concern that IT brought up for me while I was getting ready and asking how to play video over the Zoom webinar. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, 15 seconds to troubleshoot several computers to try to make this happen on.
While you're working on that, let me use the opportunity to ask for items of planning commissioner interest, and we'll see if we get that sorted out. I know we're getting close to Thanksgiving, so I appreciate everybody's presence here. And we will have our meeting December 5th. That likely will be our last meeting of the year. Again, we talk about if there could be a following meeting, but likely that will be the last meeting of the year. So do want to ask, are there any items of planning commissioner interest between now and New Year's? Commissioner Smith, any items?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Commissioner Goodman?
Not for me, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Aliff?
No, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Tessman? I'm sorry, Vice Chair Tessman?
Just one, I'm assuming for staff. I'm just curious if there's been any additional updates or movement on that potential model train museum on that corner lot.
That's a good question.
Sure. The Community Development Committee, which met just before the Planning Commission here, was considering an agenda bill that would authorize a memorandum of understanding between the city and Northwest Trunk Lines Museum is the name of the entity. And well, it looks like I'll let Chair Johnson speak to it a little more. I see he's standing at the podium there.
Oh, just in case anything came my way.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. The reason that I didn't bring it up was because I was going to wait until the council had approved or not approved the MOU. But anyway, I can still talk about it though. So the Community Development Committee met earlier this evening. We reviewed the MOU, and it is essentially going to be saying that the city will work in really good faith, with the entity known as Northwest Trunk Lines to determine how exactly the process would work for them to use the land, either a lease program or something like that. That's to be determined. And what the design and construction process would be. There are a number of different options that can be used. They're going to review the options that are on the table with Northwest Trunk Lines and provide information as necessary. And the Northwest Trunk Lines is going to say, okay, great, we've reviewed all that. Here is how we're going to come up with a sustainable business model and a number of other things so that the city can be comfortable with their position that this is something that can actually be sustainable as a project, and that it's something that we really want. So that's the level that it's at right now. That will go to council probably at the next council meeting, which will be on Monday. We did request some small change with regard to how exactly that language around, how specific they're going to be with that plan for the lease and the design and the building, all that stuff, or exactly how specific that's going to be. Assuming that staff can get that together for us on Monday, it is likely to be approved by council then. At that point, it'll just continue moving forward under the guidance of the memorandum of understanding.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Councilmember Johnson.
If staff has any other clarifications or wants to correct anything.
No, I think you nailed it. Thank you.
No, very good, very good. Vice Chair Testman, any other questions, comments?
No, Chair. Thanks very much.
Okay, and it's actually listed as item 6. I'll just bring up my item of interest. What I would like to do, well, I heard a statement that I think kind of rings true, that Zoom meetings work and in-person meetings work, but hybrid meetings not so much. And I think we face a little bit of that when and even fuels some of the difficulty of keeping clean communication. What I'd like to do, and I know that the hybrid option will always be there, but what I'd like to do is encourage us once we hit past the new year to see if we can start coming in person. And I'd like to kick that off at a planning commission. We do a New Year's in-person potluck, obviously separate from the official business, but just kind of, I think our business would be better served if we could meet in person as best we can going in the new year. And again, I understand that we need to always have the option to be hybrid, but I do think that could work better for us. Any comments on that, Mr. Sturbank?
Just a point of information it doesn't speak to should you or shouldn't you be in person, but as to the technical difficulties, there is a item in the mayor's proposed budget for audio and visual upgrades to the chamber, which hopefully will address some of the audio and the difficulties that the commission and other committees have experienced trying to do things from in a hybrid fashion. So just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that.
Yeah, no, I
And
appreciate that.
Councilmember Johnson can add more detail to that.
It might happen. There's something else, Chair, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
This is from my past experience when I was on the planning commission. I recall one of the last meetings we had before the pandemic hit. We were looking at the new Encompass building, and they had a bunch of different materials that they were able to physically pass around with the different colors and stuff. We kind of picture how they work together. And I think that made us able to visualize what the actual colors would be a lot better than when they were on the screen. And I remember a few months later, maybe even a year later, it's all kind of a blur now. There was another proposal that came through that had a mock-up of a sign that, in my opinion, was the cause of a lot of frustration around the approval of that sign. If the mock-up that they just presented us had looked better, it probably would have gone a little bit more smoothly.
Right.
And I think that in person, being able to see printouts of colors rather than how they look on the screen, I found to be really useful when I was on the planning commission. So that's just one of the reasons why I'd encourage us to try to be in person as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, I remember that well. But both passing around the piece where we knew exactly what it looked like and being really puzzled by the look of a sign. In fact, we faced that same thing with a design review that we had just last month. So yeah, that at any rate, I would definitely like to encourage us as we come into the new year to, and I think a potluck is just to get to know each other a little bit better, but that we endeavor to come in person and try to move as to that being the rule rather than the exception. I think from a, standpoint of the hybrid, that comment I made wasn't just for, just for our experience here. It was a general comment here people make. But nonetheless, although the hybrid can be offered, I think we should make that the exception. You see, Community Development Director has your hand up. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yes, thank you, Chair. Dylan, did you go to the advanced settings on share screen for the audio? It's instead of going to basic, just go to advanced and then hit computer audio.
Yeah, I can. I was just informed by IT that the video will go through our software, sent all the way to Zoom, and then back out of Zoom and to you all. And the consequences of that process is not ideal. I will try. The issue I had, the first one was because I was on I have two computers here. One controls city council chambers, and I have the second one is my work laptop. I tried it for my work laptop first with the. So I'm ready to try again, whenever.
Okay, go ahead.
But Emily, when you said computer audio,
So Dylan, when you bring up the share screen
yeah,
box in the lower left, there's a checkbox that says share sound. Make sure you check that.
okay, share sound was one of the ones checked.
Yeah, that
Under
should make it
advanced?
work. No, just under basic.
Yeah,
It's there for all of it. And you can also, I suppose you could click the optimize for video clip one too, if you want. It'll probably help.
So you all let's see if I'm correct. Okay, I'm gonna click play again for a few seconds, and I'm gonna pause it to hear feedback. And I'm not sure if there's any sound.
Planning in this state largely been gained by working for civic. One time I sat down and figured out how many people we need planning commission, community council.
Anything?
I could hear it, although it's kind of,
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to hear, but I could hear it.
it's almost unintelligible. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not make it out.
Okay, let me fiddle with some controls. I have a concern that what's going on is it's playing it out loud in this room, and it's the microphones in this room that are picking it up. Therefore, not very good audio quality, and we're already having difficulties with sound volume. We try turning the mics up.
Yeah, it should be, if you digitally share the sound, it should come across exactly as it was recorded. So, kind of puzzled by that. Oh,
Yeah, good.
we may have to bend this if we can't get any.
I'm gonna look through the settings real fast to give you a chance.
City councils, and other advisory boards I've attended, and it came up to be a pretty staggering number. Well,
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes,
better.
very, yeah, perfect.
Okay, let's give it another shot, just to confirm.
over 800 meetings, which means I've seen a lot of good behavior. I've seen a lot of great practices, and I've seen some that I would say are less so. So based on that experience, I'm trying to share with you what I think are best practices for roles in planning and how to be effective as a commission and as a council and as a staff. Next slide. You have the next slide up, Ann? Okay. Gonna have to try and increase the size of this image. Here we go. Well, listed here in bullets are all of the different individuals that are involved in the planning process. The ones that I've highlighted in color here are the ones that I'm going to talk most about tonight. It's the members of the city council, members of the planning commission, professional staff, and hearing examiners. So these are the four members of what I would call the city team engaged in planning for the community. You're serving the community, members of the community give you input, applicants for permits are involved in some of these processes that require hearings. You have different organizations who may get engaged, submit letters, give testimony, environmental groups, business groups, other local governments. So there are a lot of people that have an interest and express themselves in the planning process. Next slide. The 4 members of the city organization, I would say, are organized around a shared mission. You're all there basically for the same mission, which is to manage the growth of your community, respect the past, identify the values that are important to your community, and prepare for the present and the future. So that's the shared mission, but each of you has a different distinct role and a series of responsibilities in this process. These areas between these different groupings are intended to convey there are obligations you have to one another and there are prerogatives that each of you has. So the city council, of course, are the elected policymakers. They make the policy, they adopt the plans and the regulations. Planning commission are the appointed policy advisors. They provide recommendations to the city council about policy, comprehensive plans, development regulations, depending upon the community you're in, maybe some permit recommendations as well. And the professional planning staff are hired professionals. They're not elected officials. They're not appointed officials. They are the staff. They have some distinct roles, which I'll talk about momentarily. Off to the side, you see this hearing examiner, which most cities in the state have a hearing examiner system. Different cities have the examiner do different kinds of things. In some cases, the examiners not only have hearings on permits, some of them make recommendations to council for final action on certain permits. Others make decisions on certain permits. Some of them are used to conduct hearings of appeals of actions taken by, let's say, the staff. So there are different distinct roles for each of these members of the team. And again, you all serve the general public. Next slide. Now, when people say planning involves land use decisions, that is a true statement, but there are at least 3 very distinct types of land use decisions. I've tried to classify them here. Legislative decisions, off to the left here, include actions taken by the city council that are basically the overarching rules for what can and can't happen, what should or shouldn't happen in your community with respect to planning. The comprehensive plan, of course, is sort of the lead dog in this dog sled of policies. That's the direction of where you want to go. Shoreline Master Plan does the same thing for the lands adjacent to waters of the state, things like lakes and rivers of a certain size. The development regulations, which is zoning, subdivision, grading, other regulations that control the use of land, subdivision ordinances, such as Bob discussed earlier, stormwater ordinances, basically anything that establishes the rules that are going to apply in your community are legislative decisions made by the city council. Recommendations on what those should be are made largely by the planning commission with some input from the city staff and from the general public. Rezones have an application as a legislative decision if what you're talking about is a large area with many properties or many owners. That kind of a rezone is considered to be a legislative rezone. That's distinct from the quasi-judicial permit column you see here at the bottom of that. You'll see the word rezone again. Well, that's because certain rezones that are very site-specific, that deal with a very small number of properties, can be considered quasi-judicial. Well, what's the difference between quasi-judicial and legislative? A big difference. Quasi-judicial, as the name suggests, the body there is conducting themselves as though they are a judge, making a judicial decision. So it's a very rigorously controlled process where the rights of people have to be very rigorously guarded. Due process is very important. Avoiding some of the issues that Mr. Sturbank was talking about earlier, not being arbitrary, not being capricious, not taking property without a good public purpose. Those are the kinds of things that really limit operations in the quasi-judicial realm for those kinds of permits, things like conditional use permits, variances, preliminary subdivisions. Substantial development permit is a permit for something along the shoreline that's subject to the regulations in your shoreline master program. So those two things are different. Legislative decisions are very different than quasi-judicial permits. Over on the right side, you see these administrative permits, binding site plans, building permits, grading permits, final subdivisions. These are permits that do not require a hearing. These are permits that do not require action by a planning commission or city council or a hearing examiner. They're purely ministerial. Now you'll see across the top of these 3 boxes, 2 arrows. One talks about the degree of discretion in making decisions. The second one talks about the impact of public comment in these different kinds of decisions. And as these arrows suggest, the further to the left you go, the more discretion there is in making decisions. So when you have a comprehensive plan in front of you, City Council and Planning Commission, generally speaking, there's a pretty broad range of choices you could make. They're not unlimited, but they're fairly broad. Likewise, public comment can have a lot of influence on what you think those decisions ought to be in your comprehensive plan, your shoreline master program, your development regulations. The farther to the right you go, though, the less discretion there is and the less effect public comment can have. So for example, under the administrative permits, you see building permit listed as a permit. Well, the building permit is very much controlled by the Uniform Building Code. So there's not a lot of discretion when that staff person is processing a building permit to wield independent judgment. There really is no discretion. There really is very little judgment they can make. They're to basically make that permit decision based on the code. So that is a case where public comment has very, very little impact. Quasi-judicial, of course, is in the middle. It's not unlimited in terms of how much discretion there is. There usually are criteria that have to be consulted and applied in reaching a decision on should this permit for the plan of development or the conditional use permit be issued or not. So that's the broad range of things that people characterize as land use decisions, but they're very different kinds of decisions. Notation across the bottom there is that the Growth Management Act requires that all permit decisions, whether they're quasi-judicial or administrative, they must be consistent with the development regulations, which in turn are guided by a comprehensive plan. So the hierarchy is these legislative decisions, the policies and the rules. That's the big picture. That's the long term. That's what you're aspiring to reach. But those are implemented through things like quasi-judicial permits, administrative permits, as well as capital projects that are built and other kinds of programs. So this is the whole hierarchy kind of boiled down to this one diagram. Like with any image, it can oversimplify a lot of complex things. But here's I've tried to summarize for you some key distinctions between the legislative decisions that councils make, the administrative decisions that planning staff makes, and the quasi-judicial either decisions or recommendations that are made either by a planning commission or an examiner, depending upon what your code says about who has those hearings and who makes those decisions. Next slide. So city council's role as policymakers. I'll just scroll through these quickly. They're the elected officials. They represent and are directly accountable to the people. They appoint people to the planning commission. They give policy direction about the work program and resources to be allocated to help achieve that. And they take final action on those legislative matters that I was just discussing. They take final action on those quasi-judicial matters that the local code says go to the legislative body. As I said, in some cases, the examiner is given authority to make the decision. In other places, you can only make a recommendation and then the council has to take final action on those sorts of permits. Next. Planning commission roles. Again, remember, you're advisors as a commission. You are the first and primary body who has hearings, solicits comment from the public. You have an important expertise you bring as members of the community. You don't have to be a realtor or an architect or a builder or a lawyer to be a good planning commission member. You simply need to be somebody who lives in or does business in the community and reflects the values and perspectives of that community. Your duty as a commissioner is to listen to the staff recommendations, take the public input, weigh the evidence, pay attention to the criteria, and then make a thoughtful, well-considered recommendation to the city council. You're not decision makers, you're advisors to the council. Next. Planning staff. Well, staff plays many roles. By this, I mean planning land use doctor is they're at the front counter. Anybody walks into that counter wants information. How is my property zoned? What's going on in the project next to my house? What do I have in the way of background you can share about the community? That's one of the roles the staff plays. They also are the guide. They point out to the electeds, the appointed, to the members of the community, what's coming, what's the big picture, what can they pay attention to, how can they take part in the process. Another role they play is researcher. Frequently, a planning commission will have a hearing, they'll take testimony, they'll have a question, and they may turn to the staff and say, can you look this up for us, bring us some information back? Either can you respond now if you have the answer, or can you bring information to us at a subsequent meeting? So that's another role the staff plays. Staff is also the messenger between the commission and the council. Frequently, the commission will bring information to the council that is from the commission. Occasionally, the commission chair will come and do that as well. And finally, the staff is the enforcer of the regulations that are adopted by the council. So these are different kinds of roles, but they're all roles you expect your staff to play. Now, obligations. What does the commission owe, the council owe to the commission? The respect and support the role of the commission. Appoint commissioners who will commit the time and care needed to do the job. Carefully review the recommendations you get from the commission and take in time to understand the record and their rationale. Avoid cherry picking the record. So if 7 commissioners come to a conclusion and one of them does not, you should give weight to the outcome of the final deliberation of the entire commission and not cherry pick.
Well, yeah. Also, I think.
Other obligations? My advice, agree with the planning commission when you can, disagree only when you think you must. But when you disagree with the commission, take the time to explain why you're disagreeing. Provide a periodic two-way feedback between the commission and the council. I suggest you meet at least once or twice annually. And that they also owe direction to be given to the council commission in terms of the priorities and the scope of work for the work program. What the council owes the staff, rely on the staff to administer and enforce your regulations. Don't micromanage. Council members are not enforcers. That's why your staff is there. You should keep the workload priorities and schedule in mind. You should give appropriate deference to the technical judgments of the staff. And if you're unhappy with their decisions for job performance, you should take that up privately. Before we leave this slide, let me say one other thing, Ann, about the third bullet here.
Yeah.
Many times, both commission and staff, commission and council will say to the staff, here's my conclusion about this issue. And if the issue is a technical issue, like what's the level of service at an intersection, if you put 500 cars through it, that's a technical answer. That's not a subjective judgment. But many other judgments that you will make, many other conclusions you will reach as a commission or as a council aren't technical, they're policy. So be careful when you're thinking about, should I defer to the staff or should I not? Is it a technical question or is it a subjective question? Next slide up. What does the commission owe people? Respect and support the city council's roles and prerogative. Do your homework. Read the information that's given to you before the meeting, not at the meeting.
Right.
If you have questions that can be answered before the meeting, call or email the staff. This saves a lot of time. Give careful consideration and weight to all the public testimony, facts, and criteria that govern that particular land use decision. Have an open mind, treat everybody with respect, and strive to persuade. You're not there to argue. You're there to persuade and have an open mind to be persuaded. At the hearing, it's advisable to address everyone by their surname or their title rather than their first name. You may want to be friendly, you may want to appear approachable, but that can look funny to someone on the other side of an issue. Give appropriate deference to technical judgments within the staff's area of expertise, the same as with the council. And finally, this is important. Gracefully accept the council will not always agree with you. That doesn't mean you're wrong. The council has a right to disagree with you. As I said earlier, they will agree with you if they can. My advice is to do that. But if they can't, they're not obligated to. They're the decision makers ultimately. As I said, though, what they do need to do is when they don't agree with you to make clear that they don't agree and why, if possible. They don't have to be defensive. They don't have to argue with the commission. They just need to be clear explaining to the commission, thank you, I reached a different conclusion than you've reached based on the same facts. That's totally expected. And that's not always easy to take, but that's the way it works. Planning staff's obligation provides thorough objective analysis, alternatives to consider, and recommendations based on good facts and best practices. Again, the messenger role, carry forward and explain the commission's recommendation to the council, even if the staff did not agree with some part of it. Respect and support the commission's policy advising role and the city council's policy-making prerogatives, including, again, their prerogative to not agree with the staff and the commission. Provide responsive, complete, and timely answers to questions. Hearing examiner typically is involved only in quasi-judicial activities, permit hearings. They're professionals, sometimes they're lawyers, sometimes they're planners. They're contracted to make permit recommendations or decisions based on the criteria supported by an adequate record. This allows the local legislative body or the advisory bodies like commissions to spend time on policymaking, legislative activities, rather than a lot of time on public hearings. This also reduces local government liability exposure because you typically, if these folks are trained in the law, they're less likely to make an error that could present some kind of financial exposure to the commission, to the city, or cause the decision to be overturned on appeal. Again, it's important to remember for planning commissions, I think some of this applies to councils as well. Each member adds value by bringing your perspective, your experience, and your opinions to the commission's deliberations. So you're a team, but it's my favorite slide coming up here. It's great for people on a team to be colorful, but don't be this guy. In my 20 years in local government, I've seen all of these prototypes up on the dais. I've seen people who seem to project that they know what they're doing when they really don't. I've seen people treat others with a lack of respect, as though they know more than the other person knows. I've seen people tilt at windmills. I've seen people play the Lone Ranger. I've seen people bully. I've seen people who think that their duty is to take from the rich and give to the poor, like Robin Hood. You should never be rolling your eyes. And you shouldn't be gambling. You shouldn't be taking risks needlessly. I once had a planning commissioner in a city I won't name, who, in considering what the alternative might be that he would recommend to his fellows, literally out loud said, well, what the hell, let's try this and see what happens. That kind of cavalier approach really undercuts the credibility of the entire commission and the entire organization. So take your job seriously. You've got a right to express an opinion. Be thoughtful about how you do that and how you project that to your peers and to the people watching from the audience.
Yeah.
Next. So here's some tips for public meetings and hearings. First, we'll talk about the chair's role. It's that person's role to gatekeep, to announce the agenda, to manage the flow of items and comment, to enforce time limits, and to maintain decorum. Occasionally, you'll have to say, excuse me, you need to wrap up your comments. Others need to have something to say. Please conclude your comments. So you have to have a firm hand as a chair to keep things moving along. As part of the opening remarks, the chair should state that all the input will be given consideration, but that it's the commission's job to weigh all the information, including the comment, before they reach their own conclusions. The chair's role is also to assure that all commissioners are given a chance, equal opportunity to ask questions and express opinions. After the hearing is declared open, the staff would present the report and then public input will be taken. Time limits can be placed on the length of comments at the discretion of the chair, depending upon how many people are in the audience who want to speak. Planning commission members may ask questions of either the staff or those who give testimony, but this should be for purposes of clarification, not arguing with people. After the chair, I think we've just seen the slide. Okay, it's possible you may want to make the decision that people need to sign in, sign in to give testimony, so we know who's giving testimony, their name and their address, what item they want to speak to, and whether they're speaking in favor or against an item or otherwise. As I mentioned earlier, time limits can be established to keep things moving along. You can arrange the order of speakers so that testimony is heard in a sequence that is logical. Proponents first, then opponents, then others. So when listening to people at public hearings, keep in mind that some people are nervous. They're not used to giving public testimony. So be patient with those folks who are uncomfortable with public speaking. Be patient if they're upset or always wanting to challenge city government. Patient with other members of the committee who may not agree with you or understand your perspective. So discussion, evaluation, and deliberation, the decision-making body should discuss why supporting approval or disapproval makes sense based on reasons for the criteria, determine positions and or consensus for action. Don't seek new evidence through argument, though argument and comment may be allowed. Motion to approve or disapprove should instruct the staff to prepare draft written findings and conclusions, documenting the reasons for the decision, and then bring those back to the next regular meeting for final approval and passage by the commission. That's the end of a quick summary of some best practices. So I'll pause and see if there are questions I can answer.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe on that portion?
Figure we didn't need to hear the question and answer section, or was that to keep playing the video?
No, that was exactly the section I was hoping we would show. Good.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, that worked out well. I hope the commissioners who saw that weren't. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I found that extremely valuable. I thought it was good to show that again. Any comments on that?
Should we be meeting annually in a joint session with the city council? It's kind of the obvious question coming out of
I
that. for
think
me.
it's good. Yeah. I think
Yes.
that-
Yes, I think you should be. And there might be some opportunities to schedule that in as we start the comprehensive plan process.
Yeah, good question. Well, thank you for setting that up. I think that was valuable, and also think that just kind of clarifies roles in a very good way. And thank you to Community Development Director for arranging that for us as well. Okay. So I've covered all the items. I will do one more poll just in case somebody's had time to think about for planning commissioner items of interest. If not, then we'll cover the upcoming schedule and reconvene on December 5th for the site plan review and the historic design review amendments. So first, I'll just do another poll. Anything else from the staff that you need to cover? Okay, hearing nothing. Commissioner Smith, anything else after hearing all that?
No, I don't believe so. I think that was, appreciate the opportunity to watch that video again. I think it's something we'd all take away from that. So it's always a good refresher, especially as we head into the new year and some of the things we have on tap.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Vice Chair Tessman?
Nothing additional from me, and +1 to what Commissioner Smith just said.
Okay, Commissioner Ayliff?
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Commissioner Goodman?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Okay. So if there's no other items, I'll move to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.